Yo,
Hey, how's it going?
good man. How are you?
Pretty well. How are you?
Good.
Sorry. Yeah, but
I'm really enjoying connecting with the community today, so I'm feeling the hype.
well, I guess I'll hop right in. You can call me Hemp Hippo or Hippo for this.
Hippo it is.
So my worldview is, kind of around being empathetic, kind, and kind of respecting everybody's humanity. Um, and I've been really struggling lately with kind of existing in a world that seems to reward people for being the antithesis of that. Um, and then that kind of leads into a second part of when I see, Rush Limbaugh die or, the Capitol rioters get thrown in prison or, even an anti-masker get COVID. My knee-jerk reaction is kind of like, haha, good. Um, but I don't want to be that person, especially if I'm trying to, be empathetic and kind. I don't necessarily want to extend my empathy to them, but I also don't want to revel in their pain.
Okay. So, Hippo,
So
tell
I guess
me. Yeah, go ahead.
my question is really just like how to resist that feeling of, kind of those like fuzzy feelings you get when you see somebody get like their just desserts.
Let me think about this for a second. It's a good question. Tell me a little bit about the. You said something about like existing in a world where evil people are rewarded.
Yeah, I would say so I've kind of been struggling with I guess what I think to be dysmia or persistent or dysysmia and persistent depressive disorder for many, many years. And I think that's a lot to do with it of just, the world seems to reward selfish people. And that's very disappointing to me.
Do you feel like the world has? Do you feel like you're a good person?
I like to think I am a good person.
Do you
I
feel like the world has screwed you because of it?
oh, certainly. Yeah.
How so?
Uh, just my kindness has been taken advantage of plenty of times, or not being. I feel like I often get run over for, I guess, not being outspoken about, my beliefs, or, even people bullying me would get popular because of it, or yeah, people would be popular because of bullying, not necessarily me specifically.
Can you give us an example of like how you were taken advantage of because of your kindness?
Uh, I guess it might not even be kindness, but non-confrontationalness. Like I am a musician, and in my band, a lot of times I guess I'll put my feelings aside about like a decision, um, just to avoid the confrontation. I guess a lot of times in my head, it's like, what, I'll let them think whatever they want to think, and then eventually they'll just come around to my way of thinking when I'm proven to be right.
So justice will happen in the end.
Yeah, essentially.
What I'm hearing is that you've got a pretty big justice boner.
Uh, sure. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So Hippo, here's my take, okay? So the first thing is that I think that like you're when you look at the world and you feel like, you want to revel in Rush Limbaugh's passing. I think that that comes from like your own personal experience of injustice. right? It's like the way in which you look at the world and how like evil people are rewarded, and like evil people were rewarded by taking advantage of you. And that's sort of like why you care about it in the world. And the reason that you revel in it is because like what you really wanted is those bullies to get, justice served to them. And so when there are people that you perceive as evil who get like justice served to them, it sort of like feels really good to you because that's sort of like what you always wanted, right? Does that make sense? Like, do you see how your personal experiences and the things that you choose to care about in the world could be related?
Yeah, it's I guess what I struggle with is like, yeah, I'll have that warm, fuzzy feeling for a second, but then I'll feel really bad about harboring that feeling.
I,
I went
I,
to
yeah, go ahead.
oh, that's please, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to talk over you just then, but so I get that, and so I think that like you're a good person, but what I'm hearing is that like, so this is my impression of people who get like caught up with like issues. So I think a lot of people who get caught up with issues have a personal like driving force that causes them to care about that thing. Now that isn't necessarily good or bad, but I think sometimes people will try to save the world at the neglect to like growing as a human being. And the worst case scenario, which unfortunately I've seen, is people who are crappy human beings who who allow for themselves to be crappy because they support a good cause. Right? And like that's sort of like the end goal of like where we don't want to go, which is that I'm going to be like a complete toxic person, but because I support something that is morally correct in the macro sense, it excuses my personal behavior. And I don't need to grow as a good person because I support Black Lives Matter. And if I support Black Lives Matter, then I'm a good person and I can be mean to people on the internet and I can be, I can slash people's tires who are racist and from Texas because Black Lives Matter, and that's what makes me a good person. So I think you've got to be a little bit careful here because I think your mind is doing something very interesting, which is that you have personal experiences, which my sense is that you're projecting those personal experiences and putting the focus of your mind on the outside world. And then what happens is like your mind is looking at all these terrible things in the world and you can't fix those. And so then you begin to feel like, oh my God, the world is like a terrible place and like I can't do anything about it. And how like, look at all these like evil people that are triumphing. And that's like depressing because there's so much evil in the world and like you can't do anything about it. And so, but it's kind of weird because it's like your mind is choosing to look at problems that you have no control over. And I think the reason that you care about those problems is because they relate to you personally. It's like there were evil people who did things to you and the world did not serve them justice. And so you become very, very sensitive to that. I don't mean sensitive in like a, like a weak emotional way. I mean like sensitive in the sense that your mind is like picks up those things in the outside world.
Hyper aware of it.
Hyper aware. Very good. And then what happens is like when those people do get justice, like the part of you that yearned for justice from the bullies, the part of you that yearns for justice from your bandmates when they come around to see that way, like that part of you gets satisfied because that's what it's hungry for. And then you feel guilty because you recognize there's something like fundamentally like wrong about that revelry. So this is where everything I think comes back to home, which is like you've got to work through like your personal issues of being wronged and being non-confrontational and like being on the short end of the stick. Because until like, and as you start to do that, I think it's going to be weird, but like as you develop like tranquility and security in yourself, the problems of the world don't change. It's just you feel capable of like doing something about them. But if you want to fix the world, it's like you have to be like confident in yourself first. And then you can go out and start to do things in the world that will like start to make a dent of a difference. But the problem is if you feel like, if you don't feel confident in yourself, you can have a minor impact on goodness in the world either way. The difference is that the way that you view yourself determines how satisfied you can be with that contribution.
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. I've struggled with kind of like a deep feeling of being a burden for a really long time. And I do go to therapy almost weekly and work on it.
Yeah, good. So I think this is where I've seen this with people who have dysthymia usually, right? So like kind of like what you mentioned, whereas they have these big like existential concerns. And I know it sounds weird, but like in my experience with these people, you don't worry about the existential concerns because the existential concerns are sort of like an externalization of internal conflicts. And what you really focus on is internal conflict. And then suddenly, like if you really make progress there, and you make progress in sort of like yourself and your sense of confidence, even though the world hasn't changed, you start to look at it as something that you can like chip away at as opposed to something that is impossible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've definitely, like, I have a wonderful support group of friends, and I often catch myself waiting for them to let me down.
Yeah, so that's what you need to work on, Hippo, like root and stem. Right? So it's like when you catch yourself wait, it's beautiful that you're able to do that because like that's the way that your mind looks at the external world too. You've become hyper aware of things that will confirm your negative view of the world. And as long as that hyper awareness is there, your mind will filter out all of the reasons why the world is a terrible, filter in all of the reasons why the world is a terrible place and why you should feel hopeless. And as long as that filter exists, you're going to view the world as hopeless.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right? So I think it's good. I think you've taken a really important step in becoming aware of that filter. And like, so like, you know, if you've got the filter, like that's what you've got to remove and then the world will become a different place.
So I guess like, is removing the filter just, you know, a matter of like talk therapy and individualized treatment at that point?
How long have you been in therapy?
Therapy only about 3-4 months or so.
Okay, good. So I was afraid that because some people with dysthymia will have been in therapy for like decades. And so if you've only been in therapy for 3 or 4 months, I'd say definitely stick with it. I'd give it a minimum of a year to 18 months. If you're feeling like it's not helping, please tell your therapist, hey, I feel like this isn't helping, because that could be your dysthymia itself. Does that make sense?
Saying that nothing is getting better when it
Exactly.
really.
So let your therapist work with you on that. And the reason that you've got to tell, but you also don't want to ignore those feelings because that could be your dysthymia, or you could have a crappy therapy relationship, right? And you're not going to be able to tell the difference. Does that make sense? So you got to bring it up to
I
your
think so.
therapist and work through it and see if that's helping because you may need to switch therapists. But I'd give yourself at least like a year to 18 months in therapy. And also like continue to do, meditate if you can and become aware of as much as you can, Hippo. You don't have to change anything yet. First, you want to do like reconnaissance and like map everything out in your mind. And the more you map things out, the easier it's going to be to start changing stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely understand that for sure.
Yeah. Good luck to you, bro.
Thank you. Appreciate the words of encouragement.
I think the fact that you're coming here and you're asking this question, as long as you listen to the voice that brought you here, I think your life will change.
Okay. I think that's probably the big issue is trusting that voice.
Yep, exactly. Well said. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you just got to learn how to trust it. Because that's the part of you that wants to move forward and make a change in your life. So your biggest challenge is in not trusting that voice. Because until you start trusting it, or you don't even have to trust it, just listen to it anyway.
Got it. Will do. Thanks for all the help.
Take care, Hippo. Good luck, dude.
You as well.